my whole life up until that point was not I wasn't living in alignment. I wasn't being authentic to my goals, who I am, and what I want to accomplish. I was making $40K a year in my corporate job before I left. And last year we did $500K.
But how did you develop that courage to just quit?
I don't know that I would say I was always an entrepreneur. I didn't really know many entrepreneurs growing up.
Do you have a social media marketing philosophy?
I think one thing that I truly believe in is always show up authentically. Unapologetic confidence, I think, is really, really important when it comes to marketing on social media. I was seeing their actual work, what they were doing. I knew some of their clients, and their work wasn't actually that good, but the way they were talking about it was.
At what point can I call myself an influencer?
I think if you want to call yourself an influencer, you can call yourself an influencer at any point. That is up to you to decide, not other people. Being successful on social media and in marketing in general requires two pieces. Piece number one is...
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're having Tamar Lyons, who built her own social media marketing agency. Only a few years ago, she quit her job making $40,000 a year and now is making hundreds of thousands of dollars from her own business, and she's building that business into the stratosphere. She's helped her clients get over 200 million organic views on social media. And if you're looking to learn how to build a business, whether you should stay in corporate versus starting a business, or anything related to social media, either for yourself or for your business, you have to check out this video. Tamar, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about your background, who you are, what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So thank you for the introduction. I own a social media marketing agency, and I help service-based businesses and personal brands leverage social media in order to increase their visibility and therefore increase their sales. So I always joke and say that we impersonate people for a living because we basically go in and completely run their social media platforms for them.
That's okay. Very interesting. How'd you get into that?
I started in radio and television. I was in the TV industry. I was getting to, when I first started out, I was getting a lot of experience and exposure in social media because within, television and the media industries, of course, social media is a huge part of that. So I started building that, getting a lot of experience and exposure in social media. And I started realizing that, I love telling stories. I love helping people share their story. And social media is just a different medium than television to do that. So yeah, during COVID, I kind of made the switch to go from working for someone else and starting to work for myself. And once I did that, it was great. And I never looked back.
Amazing. So why media in general? Like, media is a very interesting career. TV, it's very glamorous and all that. Why did you get into media yourself? And what did you do? And how long were you doing it for before you switched?
Yeah, so I always loved storytelling. Growing up, I was always very creative. I loved, acting and dancing and singing and being in the spotlight, entertaining people, just making people happy and laugh and smile.
The opposite of me, basically.
No, I don't know. But yeah, no, I always loved making people happy. And I found, when growing up and, going through school and everything, my parents, they told me you have to go to university and get a real degree. You can't be an actor. You can't be a singer. You can't do things like that because it's not a real career, not viable. And so I found the next best thing, which was going into TV broadcasting, media production. And yeah, I went to school for that. I worked in the industry for about 2 years. I had interned at the Marilyn Dennis Show at CTV. I got a lot of exposure in live television production. And then I worked for a smaller production company for 2 years after I had graduated as well, while I was doing social media on the side. And I was doing social media for my boss there too. And what I started realizing was that because I was working in live documentary television and morning shows and things like that, there were so many everyday people, regular people that had amazing stories to tell, but they didn't even, number one, necessarily understand how to tell their story in the right way. And they also didn't see themselves how, important their story was. And by us asking them the right questions and speaking to them and kind of drawing that story out of them, I started to see how much it would light them up and make and just bring them the sense of comfort and creativity. And I was like, this is what I want to be doing with my life. It is helping people tell their story in a way that is effective to them for whatever their goal is. It was just so fulfilling. And so I was doing social media on the side. I was also doing social media for my boss when I was working at that small production company as well. And I just started realizing that this is another medium of telling stories. Maybe it's not on the big screen, it's not TV, but it's, everyone needs it. We're, making the shift into social media where we have such small attention spans that we all want to consume quick, easy content. And it's just another way to tell stories. And there wasn't as much I don't know if the word is bureaucracy, but I didn't have to kind of like work 10 years in the industry to become a producer for social media. Whereas in TV, you have to put in the reps, put in the work. And, you have to work your way up there to get to the point where you're actually, producing and creating that content. And I found that with social media, I had all the agency myself. I was able to, come up with an idea, quickly turn that into a piece of content and share it all within, a couple days or even a day. So definitely gave me a lot of creative agency.
That's interesting. Were you always an entrepreneur? Or did you kind of develop that trait as you grew up?
So it's funny. I always say I don't think I was ever an entrepreneur, but recently I've been thinking about it, and I used to babysit all the time. I was like the community babysitter. It's actually so funny, like for years. I think actually, that is pretty entrepreneurial growing up. But I think when I was in, corporate and working in TV and things like that, I always felt so drained. And I would always say, I'm so unemployable. Not because I don't have the skills, not because I'm not, great at what I do, not because I'm not creative, just because I don't know, like I don't thrive in like the 9-to-5 environment. Like for me, I feel super creative at like 7 a.m. But if I'm not in the office until 9, and then I have to be creative from 9 till 12, and then, take the lunch break or, the whole corporate structure, it wasn't for me. And I always had a hard time with just like doing like I guess authority a little bit, but yeah, I didn't feel that it was set up for me to be successful and for my creativity to thrive and to shine. So I don't know that I would say I was always an entrepreneur. I didn't really know many entrepreneurs growing up until I kind of started doing social media on the side and started offering this service to entrepreneurs. That's when I started getting to meet other entrepreneurs and other like female entrepreneurs, and realized that I could probably go off and do this by myself.
Unemployable sounds like the great title for my memoir. So thank you for that. Trademark. I'm using that. You're first. Okay.
Glad I could contribute to that.
You're already helping me with marketing. That's pretty good.
Amazing.
So you started this side hustle. At what point did you realize that, hey, I can actually make more money doing this outside of this corporate structure, outside of like a typical job?
Yeah. So it actually was very, very quickly on, like early on. I had started this. I was doing it on the side probably for about a year while I was also working my corporate job. And this was during the pandemic, during COVID. And for anyone who remembers, or for anyone who's been in the TV industry, during that time, things were really, really difficult in the industry. Like in order to film and to have a production, you had to have like COVID tests every day. There was just so much. You needed licenses. Like, it was just really, really hard to thrive in that industry. And so because of that, I was working from home. We had shifted over into, doing more influencer work and doing just in my actual corporate job. And I was realizing that the skills that I was using there, I was able to actually translate and do that for my clients and all that. So I was doing this about a year on the side. Then once COVID kind of was like, I'd say it was a year, like in 2021, I just started realizing I can actually bet on myself. So I remember one time actually in my corporate job, one of the things that actually was what made me want to quit and leave and go out on my own full time was that I was working for a celebrity, and he was doing a lot of influencer work at the time. Especially during COVID, it was very hard to do television. So we really were leaning heavily into YouTube and social media content. And I remember one contract came in, and I was going to be executing the entire contract. He obviously was a celebrity, so he has the connections and he built the business. And I was super, super inspired by him and everything that he had built. But I saw the value of the contract, and I realized it was going to take me about 4 to 5 hours to execute on everything that had to get done to fulfill that contract. But the value of the contract was more than my entire yearly salary.
Wow.
And when I saw that, I wasn't jealous of him. I was super inspired. I was like, I'm in the wrong position because I'm doing all the work. I'm the talent in, actually creatively executing this. But at the end of the day, I'm not getting in. I'm just in the wrong position. Like there's someone above me that's in the right position. So how can I do more of what he's doing to get to that place? And so I continued to work for him for, I think it was about 6 months after that. But it was a complete mindset shift because I just learned that was available. And I think when you're so used to, the corporate structure and the way that everyone tells you you're supposed to do things, you don't even know that that's available to you. Like to make that amount of money in a few hours was beyond what I could even comprehend ever. But having had that experience, that really inspired me to go out and to do this by myself, because I was like, I can get contracts like that. Mm-hmm. And now, 4.5 years into this, I'm closing deals significantly higher than that value of that contract. So it's just so cool to me to realize that, back then I was like, that number was so huge to me. And now, that's just a regular sale that we make. So that was definitely a big turning point for me. And there was one more thing, not to keep kind of going on about it, but I was working with one client as a freelancer at the time. And I just remember how creatively drained I felt because I was in this, I'm unemployable feeling of, I want to create and I'm not getting to create because I have to do, what my boss is telling me and things like that. And she asked me, she said, do you want to be living a mediocre life? And that really stopped me because I realized like the choices and the decisions that I had made up until that point were all getting me the results that I had, which was a mediocre life. I was like a little bit depressed. I wasn't happy. I was not feeling creatively fulfilled. I wasn't feeling fulfilled in my career. And I just, at that moment, like it was kind of like, I took radical responsibility and said, yeah, you're right. I'm making choices that are making me live a mediocre life. And if I want to change that, I have to actually make choices that are in alignment with that. And I think everything, right after that, I quit my job the next day and went in and went all in on myself. And I realized, if I bet on myself, there's no way I can lose.
That's quite interesting. I mean, a lot of people see the same thing, meaning they see that their bosses are making more than the company they work for, and how, either brand or time or people find ways to scale themselves, right? By hiring talented people like you at one point. But very few people will take that will take that jump, right? And you were married at the time. We'll get into your personal life at a different point, because that's also a very interesting part of this story. But to make that jump, what was that? So you mentioned that trigger, right? That person, radical responsibility. But how did you develop that courage to just quit and say, well, things may not work out and you're out of a job, right? Like, was that always there, or is that something you had to psych yourself into? What happened?
I think I felt like I was at rock bottom, and it actually could not have gotten worse where I was at. And so I was definitely scared. I was definitely nervous, but I also was realizing that I've never failed myself before. I know, like even the television industry, it's a really, really difficult industry to get into, especially right out of school. Right. We don't have that many broadcasters here in Canada, so the options are kind of limited in terms of getting a job. And I'm competing with everyone in my program who also wants a job right out of school. And I was always a high performer. Like I did very well in school. I got a job immediately after I graduated. I was doing different things. So I think I just had that grit to know I have never let myself down before, and what's the worst case that can happen? I was already at rock bottom. So
couldn't go any lower, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
You could be poor and not have money to live. That could be another layer blow, but you made it through.
Yeah, no, I think like I didn't think there was a different option. I was like, worst case scenario, I try this for a little bit, and then if it fails, I find another job, and then I'm miserable there. But the best case scenario is that I find more clients and I'm just going to be super happy. And I think because I had this one client, and she was really in my corner, she's actually a client of mine till today. And my first client, I used to babysit her kids, and now, I'm running two of her brands, social media platforms. And she was always saying to me, I'll refer you to so many of my peers who are, need social media. Like there's no way you can fail. Like we're all here for you. We're all in your corner. And so I think, a lot of people believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I know it's a little cliche, but I was really lucky to have that. And just having this specific client who, was really pushing for me and rooting for me made all the difference, because she put her money where her mouth was. She did refer me to 3-4 of her peers, and they did hire me to do their social media pretty much immediately after I quit my job. And the first month that I quit my job, I made, I think, 4 times the amount that I made in like less than half the time of doing work than I was making in my full-time job.
Wow.
Yeah. So that gave me the confidence because I saw I could do it.
I mean, you said something quite interesting. It's actually a tactic I've used, is that when I get stressed about a decision, right, very difficult decisions, I think to myself, what is the worst case scenario here? Okay. And maybe how to minimize that, but really the worst case scenario in most situations in life are not that bad. Meaning really it would have been uncomfortable, let's say, if you failed in that business. But if you would have quit, you would have tried it, you would not have regretted it, because you can look back and say you would have tried it, and you could have got another job, maybe a worse job, maybe it will take you a couple of years to recover. But like, that's the worst case in a lot of, and people psych themselves into thinking the worst case is much worse than it is. I mean, that's tremendous insight. Great. Good for you.
Thank you.
I've done the same thing in my life, where 4 years into my first VC job, similar situation, I wasn't so happy where I was for a bunch of different reasons. I'm not going to say on camera because of legal issues, but I decided to quit and start a business. It didn't work out as well as it looks like it's working out for you. But if I didn't make that decision, I don't know where I would have been. I probably would have been in a much worse position. Terribly uncomfortable, but I did the same thing. I'm like, what's the worst that can happen here? Yeah. And obviously 6 months before I quit, I started the business already. I was already doing side hustles and all that. So very similar.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
So sure. There are many, many marketing agencies, social media, marketing managers, all that service is very common today. when you started the business and today, how did you think of differentiating yourself, and what specific things do you do for your clients?
Yeah. So it's funny. Most people, when I was starting out, everyone was saying, you need to niche down. You need to work with one specific industry. Don't work with, everyone. You need to get really, really good at one thing. And I always say, like, I love what I do because I'm a walking, talking encyclopedia, because I work with so many different niches. We haven't niched down. And I would say our only niche is that we work with service-based businesses rather than product-based businesses. And the reason for that is because I just think it's harder and it's more challenging, and therefore it's more fulfilling and it's more fun. I think a lot of social media marketing agencies generally will focus on products and, paid ads and focusing on things like that. Whereas for us, because we're working with founders, I'm actually leveraging their story into their content. And the way that we do things very differently than others is that we do organic content, but we are very results focused. And so there's so many sales psychology pieces and marketing psychology pieces that actually go into social media that's more than just, let's post 5 posts a week and make sure we have videos and TikTok and Reels and all those things. And I think most people don't take that into consideration. I think most agencies and most people are thinking about how much volume of content can we put out rather than what pieces of content are we putting out? Why are we putting out these pieces of content? How does that actually help tie into the overall business goals? And I think that's why we've been very successful, is because number one, I'm not afraid to talk about results. Number two, I actually get those results. So, which is also kind of, I guess, why I'm not afraid to talk about them, because I can put my money where my mouth is. So yeah, I think people, you hear business owners all the time say that they've had a really negative experience working with a marketing agency. They didn't deliver. They didn't, give the results that they promised. I think that we have really, really good systems and operations in place where, number one, we actually generate those results, and we, have a really, really high standard. I always say, like, we don't do mediocre, and anyone who's worked with us, I think, can attest to that. We don't do mediocre.
That's great. So you take a service-based business or a service-based, like someone's building a personal brand with a service-based business, and you manage their whole social media, content writing, copywriting, video production, all that. You do everything.
We do absolutely everything. Yeah. I always joke, we impersonate them. So we have a lot of founders who have a product, and what we'll do is then we do founder-based content. So let's say we're running their LinkedIn, the content we would create for them would be about their personal brand rather than promoting the actual product, because we really do prefer to work in like the service-based and personal brand space. But we work with like doctors, lawyers, physiotherapists, construction companies, landscapers, photographers, videographers, like just really anyone in the like business coaches, things like that. And I really we get into their head. We start creating content. We write their copy. We will give them direction for video content if they need. We actually will go out and film content for them. We edit it. We will also do engagement, which is a whole other piece of it. But yeah, everything that has to go into running a brand, running an organic, everything that goes into running a social media account, we will do for a brand.
Right. Okay, very interesting. We're going to get into LinkedIn and why it's so cringe and how it developed into what it is and why people make fun of it all the time, including myself, even though I use it all the time. Okay, but we'll get into that because that's quite interesting for me. So tell us about the business today, how it's doing, the stats, what are your plans? And then I really want to get into actual social media strategy, what people should look out for, all that stuff.
Yeah, totally. So right now, we just hired our first full-time employee, which is really, really exciting because I think for myself, that was in January. And so, thinking about how this was just an idea that I had that I started because I wanted to do things differently. It's just, to me, was so exciting. We have a team of 5 people, with one being, full-time and the rest being contractors. And it's so incredible to see the growth and just see that, this was just an idea. It was just something that I was doing because it was fun and I want to create. And now I'm actually giving opportunities to other creatives, and they're so happy to be doing the work. So I'm really proud of the work that our team has done. We are obviously every day, like we're in scale mode now. It's really fun. It's really challenging, especially for me because I have like a digitally nomadic lifestyle as well, where I'm not really in one place, and I try not to be. So I'm, building the business while also really building the life that I love and that I want to be living. So really, being mindful and creating it on my own terms rather than what everyone else says is like, this is the way to do things. And yeah, I just want to continue to grow. I want to start offering a PR arm of what we do, because right now we've been really, really heavily focused on social media marketing and organic content. But I'm seeing with a lot of our clients that are pretty big personal brands that have podcasts or books and things like that, how the public relations aspect of things is really helping with that. So my goal in the next year is to bring on that service as well and kind of grow and scale it in that sense. And yeah, just continue to grow and continue to have really big impact.
Okay. What about revenues? How much money are you making?
I don't want to talk about it. I feel like I know originally we said it we would, but yeah. Last year we did 500K, which I think is just insane to me. Absolutely insane. Nice. I was making 40K a year in my corporate job before I left. And to go from that to, what we've done just last year is wild. This year, I kind of parked myself in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, which is a really great place for retirees, but also a really great place to kind of hibernate and really, really get focused. And so I was really, really lucky. I was surrounded by a lot of really high-powered entrepreneurs and a lot of people who actually had expertise in the areas that I did not. Operations being one of them. I'm a creative. I'm a visionary. I'm not someone who is going to sit there and create SOPs, but I was surrounded by so many, 7 and 8 figure business owners telling me the reason you're not getting to the place you want to be is because you don't have those proper SOPs and operations. So in December, I sat down and I hired one of my friends to coach me and give me direction on exactly what I needed to do, because she is brilliant and has built multiple businesses, had multiple successful exits, and told me exactly what I had to do. And so I listened and I did it. And in Q1 of 2025, we had an 89% increase in comparison to Q1 of 2024, which is just wild. I did all of this while literally living in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, having a really, just really getting to live a balanced life where I felt like, yes, I was locked in, dialed in, working and building, but also really, I was doing ice baths and going to the gym and hanging out with my friends and going to the beach in the afternoons and just really being able to have that really, really great balance that I think is not really available to most people when they do things the way that everyone tells them they're supposed to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, oh my goodness. I was thinking about myself at a certain point. Like I'd be working 12 hours a day, making not that, good money for most people, but like not something to write home about. And it's like that freedom is like amazing. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So do you have a social media marketing philosophy or like that you want to share that drives how you do what you do?
Yeah. I think one thing that I truly believe in is always show up authentically. I think that is at the core of everything. I think that like the energy somebody has, the way we show up, the confidence, all those pieces really, really, really play into, how your content is made and what that looks like.
What if you're like not a good person though? If you're authentic, then nobody's going to like
Well, I think you can always find authentic things to talk about. And hopefully if you're not a good person,
I'm not speaking about myself. Other people I know, my friend.
I think everyone has some good qualities that they can bring into what they do. But I always say, like, being successful on social media and in marketing in general requires 2 pieces. Piece number 1 is being really good at what you do. And piece number 2 is having unapologetic confidence with how you talk about it. Mm-hmm. Because this is something that I realized too, especially early on.
I'm good at that because I talk about things I know nothing about, but I'm so confident that people listen and take you seriously.
I'm not joking. That is honestly, that's the key. Like I could be talking about something I have no idea about. And as long as I show up with unapologetic confidence, people will believe me. And I think that was something that I had learned about 2.5 years into the business. Mm-hmm. I was looking at other social media marketing agency owners and I was looking at their content and I was realizing how it was activating me, making me feel something, it was generating like emotional response, which is literally the entire point of marketing is to generate an emotional response so that you'll take action. And I was seeing their actual work, what they were doing. I knew some of their clients and their work wasn't actually that good, but the way they were talking about it was. And so to me, I was like, what do they have that I don't have? What are they doing that I'm not doing? And it was truly that piece. It was the way in which they were talking about their craft, the way in which they were talking about their results and their marketing and what they were doing. And I said, yeah, I just have to show up with more unapologetic confidence. I have the results to back it. And I just need to start talking about it more. And it's interesting because clients come to me all the time and say, they're like, we want to work with you because you talk about the results that you bring and you're not scared to. So it's definitely been unapologetic confidence, I think is really, really important when it comes to marketing on social media.
Mm-hmm. So when should somebody or a business start thinking seriously about social media marketing or building a personal brand or even going down this path? Like when should you take it seriously? Yeah.
I think right when you start the business, if you're a founder, people want to actually connect with other people. They don't really, products is a little bit different. Like I wouldn't say you want to start with social media, the day you have a product. I think once you have a brand, once you have a product, once you have a business, once you're, developing that, show the behind the scenes of building it, but also be real and talk about it. Midday Squares, for example, does an amazing job at this. I've been following them for years, like pretty much when they started. Mm-hmm. I remember when they were only selling their product in Montreal. I discovered them through social media. I literally went out and bought their product because I resonated with their story. They were sharing their wins. They were sharing their failures. They were sharing everything. And I was I felt like by me buying that product, I actually I could see the impact it was having. So they do an amazing job at marketing. I think the way that they show up and they are truly so authentic. They talk about their wins, their failures and pivots and things like that. And they just make it very human. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important. People want to connect with people. And, big brands, you see it all the time, like these big companies that'll market their things and they're marketing things, they're not marketing stories. And that's when you're doing things really effectively, is when you're actually telling stories and getting people to feel something. And I think immediately once you have a product or a business, you can start telling your story as a founder and people will start resonating with it as long as you're showing up authentically and talking about your journey.
Okay, I love to tell my story, of course, because I'll first ask this, and I'll go into my own kind of social media journey because it's been a wild ride. What's the first thing someone should do if they agree with you and they say, okay, I'm building a business or I have a personal brand, I'm selling a service, I want to start my social media marketing journey. What do they do? What's the first thing or second thing?
The first thing that I would recommend somebody do if they're in that position is to think about things that are, think about their core messages that they want to be sharing. I think a lot of people just like put out content and they get stuck in this place too, because what am I going to talk about? Why should I talk about? What if nobody cares? Things like that. Really just go to your offer suite. What are you offering? So, if you're a business coach and you're offering coaching, like what are the 3 different, pieces in your offer suite? And then build your content pillars around that. That way, all your messaging can then come from there, and all your messaging will be around something that you're actually selling. So you're not just kind of putting out content and building awareness. You're putting out content, you're building that awareness, and then also you can funnel people into an offer. So that's pretty much the first place I start whenever it comes to social strategy is what is the actual offer? What is the business goal? How will those offers tie to the business goals? And then how can we create content that will then funnel people into those different offers?
Mm-hmm. So how should someone think through a budget when dealing with social media marketing?
That's a great question. That is actually an amazing question because I feel like people all the time, it's all over the place. Some people think I could just get a high schooler to go do my social media and I could pay them minimum wage, or I want to pay $20 an hour.
I have like 7 Pakistanis right now working on content for me.
Yeah, right. I can outsource it, things like that. And I think when you do that, what you end up getting is you find people who are just creating content. Sometimes you can get lucky. Like don't mean to knock anybody, like, overseas, there's a lot of great people that you can outsource to.
By the way, I was joking about that. I write all my own stuff.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. But I was going to say, I think a lot of people think that social media, because it's new and people aren't aware of it, people think that social media is like a cheap and cheerful thing, and it's absolutely not. I would say if you want someone who knows their way around social media, you'll probably be paying on the low end about $1,000 a month for somebody to be running maybe like one platform for you. Not someone with like actual, I wouldn't say expert level expertise, but somebody with, the know-how, the knowledge, how to create content, what they should be doing. If you want an expert, someone who's going to have strategy, someone who's going to be executing and maybe on a couple more platforms than just one, you're going to want to be budgeting between like $2,500 all the way upwards of like $6,000 per month for your social media marketing. And that's just the organic content. That's not even bringing in like budget for ads or any other element. But I do think, if you do have
Canadian dollars or US dollars?
We charge in USD, but yeah, I'd say I would say, if you find someone in Canada that's charging in Canada, you can do that too.
That doesn't sound egregious sometimes.
Yeah. Something off in that ballpark. But I will say the more budget you have, the more you generally get what you pay for. And there's so many people that come to us because we're in like the $3,000 per month range and upwards from there. A lot of people come to us and, they get a little bit, maybe they didn't have the budget for it. And then, it's a little bit staggering for them initially. They go work with someone else and then they come back and work with us. Mm-hmm. And so I always say, you think that hiring an expert is expensive. You should see how expensive it is by hiring an amateur, because then you're paying 3 times, so.
Or you're not getting the results.
And you're not getting the results.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely, I think there is so much value. If you can allocate, budget for it, it is so worth it, because you're building, especially if you can have a strategy, because having someone just put out content for you that's not strategic, you're literally throwing money into a hole, because what is that doing for you other than just kind of generating buzz, right? I don't care if I get 100 likes on a post. If it's not making me any money, what's the point of that post, right? If it's not strategically aligned with an overall strategy of how that's actually going to, translate into a bottom line, what's the point? So I would much rather spend $5,000 a month on having really, really good high quality social media content that's actually taking people through a buyer's journey and then actually buying at the end of the day, versus having, someone create really nice graphics or videos of me or a brand and it's, just getting my name out there. And there is value in both. Like, you do have to look at like visibility, but then also you have to look at conversion. So I don't believe that most social media managers are concerned with both of those elements, but we are.
Very interesting. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm doing, because I'm breaking all your rules, by the way. I post about all kinds of crazy stuff with no strategy whatsoever. And I do it because it's something I want to say. So I started off posting on LinkedIn. First of all, I hate posting stuff. and I don't even like what I'm doing now. I mean, I like it. I began to enjoy it, but putting myself out there is so uncomfortable. First, maybe that's even a good question to ask first, because like, it's so uncomfortable putting myself out there. I imagine a lot of your clients feel the same way, right? How do they get over that initial like reticence to be like out there and putting out, even if somebody's writing it for them, it's their opinion that's being put out there, their perspective, their face, their image, whatever. How do people get over that?
I think it all goes back to your why. And, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're, a C-suite executive, whatever it is, you're somebody who's doing something big, you went into this to change people's lives. And I think my philosophy is that by not showing up, by not putting yourself out there, by not taking up that space that you have and hold as an expert in your field, you're actually holding people back from them experiencing a transformation. You're stopping them from experiencing your expertise. And so to me, I kind of look at it as, you have these gifts, you have this expertise, you do this for a reason. Social media is just a way for you to impact more people. And when you operate from a place of impact versus a place of ego, which is, I don't really want to show up because, it's uncomfortable, you realize like I have these skills because it's my mission and I need to show up. I think that's the way that I look at it. And it's really about your why. Why are you doing this? And you don't want to be your industry's best kept secret, because then you're not having an impact. Right.
So around, April 2021, I really never posted on social media before April 2021 because I was very uncomfortable. I felt I didn't have anything to offer that was, hey, there's like 1,000 other people doing what I do. I'm in venture capital. Every venture capitalist thinks that they know everything. They have an opinion on everything. And so I was like, what am I going to, like, there's no point for me to post on LinkedIn and create videos and do the podcast and all that stuff. So around 2021, COVID restrictions were still crazy. The vaccines were being rolled out. I was like, I can't deal with this stuff anymore. I was so against a lot of the things that were going on. I'm like, I have to say something. So I did my research. I did whatever I could. And that's when I really started to post on LinkedIn, which is like the worst thing you can do. Posting whatever the government was doing related to COVID restrictions, being political. That's a big no-no on social, especially places like LinkedIn. And I was working for a large corporation. I was working for the largest tech company in Canada. Okay. And I was at that point starting to run their venture arm on a kind of quiet basis. And so I took a big risk, but I felt that I had to say something. I was like, until I say something, I'm uncomfortable, right? Because I was witnessing so many people suffering as a result of stupid government policies. And I'm like, oh, people are reading my stuff. I saw the impressions and the interactions, like, oh, people are actually reading this. So I put out my first piece of business content and it got like 150,000 impressions. I was like, oh my gosh, like 150, maybe, I don't know, let's even say 10% read it. I'm like, 10,000, 15,000 people read what I wrote. Like, whoa.
Yeah.
Then I was like, okay, that's how everything started. But I could post on random stuff. Anything that I'm interested in, anything business related, government, politics, especially my industry, venture capital, startups. Yeah, but that's how I started. I don't know. Would you have discouraged me from doing that if you would have met me at that time?
I think it really served you, given where you're at, where you're at in life, where you're at in your career and things like that. So I absolutely would not have discouraged you. If you were my client at the time, I probably would have discouraged you from talking about political things. But I do actually say with a lot of my clients, the best way to come up with what you believe the best way to come up with, content that is agitational, which is really important in creating content that will convert, content that will evoke an emotional response. You need to think about...
Agitational meaning pissing people off.
Meaning evoking an emotional response. Ideally, you want it to be in alignment with a service that you have so you can funnel people into it.
Okay.
So I don't mean like I want my clients to be posting about like politics and things like that. I mean more so think about what are the things that you believe specific to your industry and how do your beliefs differ from most people. So, if for example, in my industry, people say, yeah, the more content, you just have to be consistent. Consistently put out content, you're going to be successful. Well, my belief, which is counter to that, is consistency doesn't really mean anything if you're consistently doing the wrong things.
Right.
So have a strategy and then be consistent with the strategy and make sure the strategy works and then be consistent. But consistency is not the most important thing when it comes to your social strategy, in my opinion. That is very controversial in the social media space where people are telling you, just post, the more you post, the better you'll do. So in your case, I would say, yeah, you created a lot of visibility for yourself. And I think that it served you in how you grew and where you were going in your career. But yeah, I definitely do not tell my clients to post about politics unless they are a politician, unless they are, in government space or things like that. But I'm not one to tell people to shy away from controversy. I think it can be really, really, really supportive to your business goals on social media if it's done right and done strategically.
At what point can I call myself an influencer?
I I think if you want to call yourself an influencer, you can call yourself an influencer at any point. That is up to you to decide, not other people.
Identify as an influencer, I guess.
I think, it's interesting because now we're in this influencer economy. And I think even for me, having lived in Mexico as a digital nomad, there were a lot of people that were living there, creating content for brands and for, hotels and different companies. And they didn't have more than, 2,000 followers on Instagram. They had no LinkedIn presence. They were considered micro influencers. And I think that micro influencers are a great resource because I think people trust you more when you have like 2,000 followers for telling people to purchase a product versus when you have 100,000 followers. It's very obvious you're being paid for, your audience. So with that in mind, I would say at any point you could call yourself an influencer. If you are impacting people and you are inspiring people, I think you can call yourself an influencer.
Okay, great. You heard it here first, everyone. I am an influencer technically, and there we go. So I want to share also as an addendum to kind of how I started, which is I started with like posting about something that I cared about. It was everything I wrote myself, for example, and it transformed into writing about my expertise, which is venture capital, helping startups raise money, all that, and that content has been doing very well. To the point where in 2024, last year, I did an analysis. I've never set out to make money from this. It's still not my goal today. It's not my goal at all to make direct money from social media stuff. But in 2024, I did the calculations. Direct money I've made from social media, $17,000.
That's amazing.
I think I spent maybe $2,000 all in with all the different things that I have to do to produce social media, which basically is paying for studio space and, that's it. I mean, I started to professionalize a little bit more, but I actually stepped back from professionalizing it and producing more stuff myself, like, because I could do better and quicker and whatever, and I enjoyed the process a little bit more. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy. It's not even something I've optimized for. I don't want to say I didn't even try because at some point you have to try to make money, right? But like I never set out, like as an example, someone reached out to me from one of the content I posted on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need help with this particular thing for my startup. I'm like, I don't really do consulting. Like I run a venture capital firm. Like that's not what I do. Like I threw out a number. And I was like, whatever, It's like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Like, oh no, they actually have to do the work.
That's why I really like LinkedIn, by the way, because I think that on LinkedIn, you have a lot of serious people who are, in business and they're looking for solutions. And I think people who really value, their time. And if you can hire somebody to, give you the answers to your solution and you can have that in a relatively short amount of time versus, having to DIY it yourself and figure it out. I think there's so much value in that.
Right.
We used to use like Instagram as our main form of marketing and we're really good at Instagram marketing. There's so many things that go into it. I doubled down on LinkedIn as of December of this past year. So the last like 4 or 5 months. And that's, I think, one of the biggest reasons that we've had such a big increase in the first quarter was because of, we were marketing in the right places rather than working harder, creating more content. Because Instagram is so much more visual. You need video, you need aesthetic video, aesthetic photos. LinkedIn, you can do, the videos don't have to be that great. They just have to be, video content's really important, but they don't have to be like super highly produced and aesthetic. The content has to just be authentic, founder focused, things like that. And we really, 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 I think, LinkedIn was a great place to be, especially if you're selling B2B. That is absolutely it. And people all the time reach out to us. I don't even really post like, hey, I do this, I do social media, here are my offerings. I never, ever post about that. I always talk about like perfectionism and mindset and being an entrepreneur and, my own personal journey of, resilience and things like that. And people reach out to me all the time and say, hey, I need someone to do social media or I need someone to audit my social. Like, can you help me with that? And I've just built so many good connections through that way where those people are now referring me to their clients. And it's just been a really fun community to be a part of.
Right. And there's also second and third order effects. Like take out the direct monetary consequence, which surprised me even, is that a lot of people now see you as an expert, really. If you have enough traction, meaning I even look at people's LinkedIn sometimes and say, okay, well, this person has a lot of followers, a lot of engagement. Therefore, they have a perspective that is interesting, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's exactly the right perspective to have, but it's natural, right? You see other people, it's like social proof, right?
Yeah. Vanity metrics are a thing for a reason.
Yeah.
I think I say this with my clients all the time. If someone ever comes to me and says, I want to build my goal is to get to 10,000 followers on Instagram or 10,000 followers on LinkedIn, I usually will turn them away as a client because I don't care how many followers you have. I care about how much our content is working. I have one client where, she's amazing. She's an interior designer. She tells me all the time, she's like, I'm booked out. She's like, my engagement is not, I don't know if it's good in terms of how many, we're not getting that many video views per video view, but I'm booked out. I can't take on more clients. All my clients are coming through social media. So does it really matter that your video got 1,000 views versus 4,000 views? Or does it matter that now you have a client that, and a project to work on? And I think that's the way that we look at things is, vanity metrics are vanity metrics, but also at the same time, if someone has 10,000 followers on LinkedIn and is getting 200 comments on, their posts and a bunch of likes, clearly they are doing something, and we do take that into consideration. So I do think both pieces are important. Like, actually consider what is the impact of that engagement if you're paying for somebody to do it for you. But also, 100%, those vanity metrics definitely do play a part.
Right. So why is LinkedIn so cringe, despite it being useful?
I think that LinkedIn was always a online resume place for people to just talk about, just share things from their company that they're working for, or, their own company, sharing articles and news articles. And it wasn't really ever a place of creativity. I never looked at it in that way. And I think that LinkedIn was always like very, very business and professional focused, whereas Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and, YouTube Shorts even had a much more creative element to it. And then I think a lot of the people who missed the big boom on TikTok and then also missed it on Reels and on Instagram are starting to see that now LinkedIn is trying to catch up. LinkedIn is now, putting out their video features. LinkedIn is now pushing more of that. And so people who have tried and not made it on other platforms have now migrated onto LinkedIn. And so you have all these LinkedIn influencers who are trying and, putting out their content and growing. And I think a lot of it is AI generated. A lot of the engagement is AI generated.
Gosh, so terrible.
You can't, it's like, I literally have people commenting on my posts sometimes with like quotations and, the M dash from ChatGPT. And it's like, it's so inauthentic, and it's so funny to me and ironic because I'm all about authenticity. That's like one of my core values. So it's just very funny to see that. But I think that element, like there's been the human element of engagement on LinkedIn specifically has been so stripped away. So I think that adds an element of cringe. Plus people who are just putting out content for the sake of putting out content rather than coming from a place of service and actually trying to help people.
So do you, there was maybe a 2-month period in 2024 where I tried to use AI to generate content. I was just experimenting. And you can tell, if you actually looked at my posts, you can probably tell which ones are AI. It's embarrassing, right? So would you encourage people using AI or no? It sounds like no, but it does.
We use AI. Okay. I absolutely will encourage people to use AI. I will encourage people to use AI strategically and properly.
Okay.
I would never, ever tell somebody to put, just a general prompt into ChatGPT, copy and paste that. We have, and I've met a lot of really, really, really cool people who are, ChatGPT experts, whatever that means, but people who are really, really good at coming up with specific prompts that actually you can train ChatGPT to be somebody. And if you have certain formats or certain consistent things that you want to be outputting, ChatGPT is really, really great in helping you format something. For example, for me, I absolutely use ChatGPT for a lot of my content. It's actually gotten better because we use ChatGPT, because I have a formula in how I like my content to be. I can't outsource that formula if I can't actually dictate that formula. If I can't say, here's why I like this, here's why it's important, here's why it's strategic, I can't create a standard operating procedure of how I like to write my content. But because of AI, I've actually put in, hundreds of posts that I've done into ChatGPT. I've then asked ChatGPT to give me the formula that I'm using. It then gives me a prompt that I can then use to regenerate that formula. And then I created an SOP, I hand that off to my team. And now my team is creating content that literally sounds like me because it's actually based in content that I had written, over the last 4 years. So I would never say start with ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a really great place to use to come up with ideas. Work on your own content first, generate your voice, find what it is that you talk about, find your messaging and your pillars and all those pieces. Once you've generated enough real content, then you can use ChatGPT to help you reproduce it and come up with formulas for it. So I think if you're not using AI, you're behind the curve. You're just going to fail because I don't think you should be using it to write your content, but I think to use it as an assistant, you'll be able to do so much more in such a short period of time. Like it's wild how I just think about the hours that I spent before ChatGPT and before I was using AI, and now that I'm using it effectively and properly, it's a game changer.
I see. Yeah, I agree with that. I use it a lot for research. Like Grok is very good. Oh my goodness. I use a lot for research, fact check myself sometimes, find sources for things, and sometimes for writing. But I even gone the opposite with writing. I'd rather, and intentionally, I put mistakes, grammatical mistakes in my post, just so people know I don't use AI. I'm not joking. I actually do that. Yeah. I make it sound like it's written by someone speaking to another person, because there's kind of this voice that AI has. It's very robotic, obviously, because it's written in a very clean way. It's not the way people talk or write, generally speaking. So I've kind of gone the opposite when it comes to the writing of the content, but I use a lot for research. Yeah. That's great. So how do you make a piece of content go viral?
That's a great question. I think there's part of it is a formula, part of it is strategy. also part of it is testing. And so I think what you want to really do before you post anything is think about who is your target audience. What is a symptom of what is a symptom of a pain point that they're facing, not just what is a pain point that they're facing. If you can really get into their head, understand what it is that they're feeling and experiencing now, share it in their voice, and then also, leverage trends, leverage different formats that work for them. I think that is the key. For example, one of the things that we've identified for a few of my dermatologist clients, the first time I worked with a dermatologist, I started realizing, okay, what we need to do in order to get them new clients is, number one, we need to, create content that, number one, is really, really visible and viral, but then also create conversion content. So we strategically will create content that I now know will go viral because of testing that I had done for, a few months of working with a dermatologist. And so a lot of people like things that appeal to their senses. So ASMR type content where there's sound and very, up close visuals and it's very much in your face. You can see everything. We would show like procedures that he was doing, but like really, really like hyper close-ups. And then also we would get really trending audios that were going viral and leverage that as well. We would have, big hooks and visual hooks so that people were watching and like we'd do like a lot of cuts. Like there's just a lot of visual things that go into making somebody continuously want to watch your piece of content. Also now, it's like creating content that goes on loops. So let's say it's a 3-second video that's, a loop and with a lot of text on it so that people have to watch your video multiple times so that they can actually see that video and read out all the text. There's things like that. But one of the cool things that I learned from that dermatologist client and the content that we were doing for him is that I was able to then take that format and do that for other clients. So we were doing what we were doing for him in the dermatology field for a client of mine in the landscaping field. And so it's obviously very different work. There's no like procedures in landscaping like that, but we would, get really, really close up on grass cutting and like the sounds of that and what it looks like just really, really test things out and then apply that and really double down. But I think you need to look at what has been working for my audience, look at the actual insights and analytics, what got a lot of views and what about it got a lot of views, and then test each variable. And then you will then create your own personal content viral formula.
That sounds very scientific. Scientific approach. That's great. Okay. What platform should people use? Because you talked, should you be using everything? Is Instagram better for certain types of businesses versus LinkedIn for others? Like take, for example, an average startup out there building some tech company. Where should they start with which platform?
I hate this answer, but it really is. It depends. It depends on who your target audience is, and it depends where they live. And if you are if you're doing B2B, if you're doing direct to consumer, I think it really does matter. If you're a tech company and you're just starting out, I would say probably LinkedIn is going to be a good spot for you. Again, it depends on what the tech is. It depends on where your audience is.
Let's start from the opposite point of view. Let's take the major social media and say let's say X, Instagram, LinkedIn, totally. TikTok.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always look at it in kind of every platform has its own, is best for a different thing. So for visibility, for virality, for getting new eyes on your content, getting people to, for awareness, I would say TikTok and YouTube Shorts, and therefore YouTube. Those are really, really good awareness platforms. So people can discover you without knowing who you are, without having followed you, through TikTok and YouTube Shorts, and with Instagram Reels as well, because Reels generally get pushed out to people who are not following you. So those are really good visibility platforms if you're wanting people to find you that don't know you. If you're looking for a really good nurturing platform, so to take people through that phase, Instagram is an amazing platform for that because it is a little bit more authentic. In your Instagram stories, you can show behind the scenes, more of your personality, things like that. But it is also very curated. So you're creating a kind of a funnel or a flow for us, telling a story for people to be going through. So Instagram is a lot more for generating trust and building relationships with your audience. So they might find you through TikTok, and you'll see most people from TikTok will actually want you to then follow them on Instagram because there's a lot more, the conversion phase happens there when you're really building and nurturing people in your audience on Instagram. I would say LinkedIn is definitely in the awareness phase too. It's not, the conversions can happen there in like the, in the private messages, things like that. But your content absolutely should be about, building awareness, being a subject matter expert, visibility, things like that. X as well. I think if you have a big following on X, especially depending on the industry, tech, finance, things like that, and government, things like that, I'd say X is a really, really good place to be for you. X can also have a big discoverability element, but I do think it also helps build awareness. And then Facebook, I would say it depends on your audience. If you are looking to sell certain products or certain services to an older generation, I think Facebook is really, really, really great. It just depends. Most of our clients, I'd say only people who are really appealing to an older generation, we use Facebook and it works really well for them there.
Got it. what is the biggest mistake you see people making, businesses or personal brands making when they do social media marketing?
They just put out content for the sake of putting out content. There's no strategy behind it. And you can tell, like, they're putting photos in the wrong dimensions on Instagram. And they change all the time. Like, I don't blame people, you know, like, you're running your business and social media is not, you didn't go into business to become a content creator. But I think, you know, it's not about the volume of content that you put out. Just because you post 5 times a week does not mean you're going to have success. I would much rather you post 3 times a week, but you have actual reason behind why you're posting those 3 times a week, as opposed to just putting out content for the sake of it. I think there is value in testing, but again, strategically testing. Why am I putting out this piece of content? What about it can we then, once we put it out there and see the results, how can I look at the analytics and shift that and change that? But I do think people associate volume with success, and it's really not about volume. It's truly about quality.
Right. Do you have any book recommendations for the audience here?
Yeah. It's funny. I don't read a lot about marketing. I feel like I get a lot of my marketing either through some of my clients that have been doing this for years, and I kind of take, I've gone through so many strategies and seen that. My book recommendations are all around mindset, because I think for me that has been a big, like, one of the biggest pieces that has gotten me through everything in life up until this point. So absolutely, Think and Grow Rich, I think it's a classic. But it's a classic for a reason. It completely shifted the way that I view everything. In Think and Grow Rich, I think he references another book called The Science of Getting Rich, which also another mindset book, which is all, it's a little bit like out there and a little bit like esoteric, but really cool. Taught me a new way of thinking. So that absolutely, I'd say, is a book recommendation. I read a lot of Gary Vee's books. I read all of his books when I was starting. And I think that actually helped me understand, like, what is good content? How can I continue to create good content? So I don't remember the exact title. It's like Jab, Jab, Hook, something like that. It's one of his first books. Really, really, really great. It's just a little bit outdated now because it was written so many years ago and there's new platforms that didn't exist when he was writing it. But the strategies, I think, are really good. But yeah, I'd say those are probably like my top 3 recommendations. And then there's another book that I live by also. It's called U Squared, and that is by Price Pritchett. And it's about how to multiply your personal effectiveness, U to the power of 2. And again, it's all about mindset coupled with taking aligned action.
I see. And this mindset focus that you have, it sounds like, obviously we talked before, and this comes from a lot of personal experience. I'd love for you to at least walk me and the audience through, like, okay, you got married very young, right? And you separated from your ex-husband. Like, how did that impact, number one, your desire to start a business, and like how it's helped you be more successful?
Yeah, totally.
Getting out of, whatever situation you were in.
Yeah, I came to a realization a couple of years ago when I realized that I was living my life based on what other people told me I should be doing, rather than getting clear on what it is that I want and the actions I need to take in order to get there. And I think through building my business, and through, getting involved in all of this mindset work, I started realizing this is what being an entrepreneur is all about. I don't remember who said this. It's not my quote, and I don't know who it is, so I don't want to take credit for it, but I want to share because it's so important. Entrepreneurship is personal development disguised as business. And I think through building my business and, building the resiliency muscles and the things that I had to do just to grow, just from a career and entrepreneur standpoint, I started realizing I have to take aligned action and I have to show up authentically all the time. And my whole life up until that point was not I wasn't living in alignment. I wasn't being authentic to my goals, who I am, and what I want to accomplish. And, I grew up, I got married very young. I didn't really know what I wanted in life. And I just came to a realization that I have to live in alignment with what I want. And that relationship and, following what other people tell me is the right path has not gotten me to the success that I was promised. And even going into the corporate world and, going down that path and not getting, the results that I wanted to see. And so I show up in my business every day. I tell everyone to show up authentically. And I just realized, like, how I was showing up for my clients, how I was showing up for my friends. I wasn't following my own advice. And so that relationship had to end. It was not feeding, it wasn't giving me positive energy. It wasn't helping me get to my goals. And, thankfully I was very, very lucky. It was an amicable divorce. It was, he's a great person. We just really were not for each other. And I think obviously even I had the best case scenario divorce because we were young, didn't have kids. And it was just really, I say it was an expensive breakup, but I do think, still going through that, it's a huge change. And I think whether or not, you're going through a separation, a divorce, a breakup, business partner breakup, any type of grief, I think people can relate to. And I think for me, I have a strong belief in healing out loud and in sharing what I'm going through, because resilience is what makes people successful. And I really saw that through my clients too, is if they had a launch that failed or they launched a product and it didn't do as well as they thought, they weren't sitting around and moping about it for months. They got up and said, okay, what can we change? What can we optimize? How can we bounce back? And then their second launch was super successful. And I just, that's what I really believe that. And I see that every day. So I definitely think, resilience in everything that I do is necessary. It's necessary for all entrepreneurs. And yeah, like we go through hard times, but I think just because things are hard, it doesn't mean that they're wrong. And I'm like grateful for everything that I learned from that experience. And I'm grateful that I'm able to, share my experience and help people that are suffering in silence.
That is incredible advice, because when I speak to other investors, VC investors and other entrepreneurs, the most important factor for success is grit, or another way to say resilience, right? Because it's not a straight line. People go up and down and they fail multiple times before they find success. And even when they find success, it doesn't mean that everything is going well. One great entrepreneur I spoke with sat across from me here. He said after he sold his business and made tens of millions of dollars, he got divorced, right? Because he focused so much on building the business and he got right into another business, and that destroyed his family. And that grit is really what separates the successful entrepreneurs from those who aren't successful. Tamar, this has been a very, very interesting conversation. I learned a ton, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.